The rules on veiling, specifying which women must veil and which could not, were carefully detailed in Assyrian law. Wives and daughters of seniors had to veil, concubines accompanying their mistress had to veil, former sacred prostitutes now married had to veil, but harlots and slaves were forbidden to veil. Those caught illegally veiling were liable to the penalties of flogging, having pitch poured over their heads, and having their ears cut off. Laws 183. The law on this matter is analyzed at some length by Gerda Lerner, and it is to her analysis that we owe the insight that the veil served not merely to mark the upper classes, but more fundamentally to differentiate between respectable women and those who were publicly available. That is, use of the veil classified women according to their sexual activity and signaled to men which women were under male protection and which were fair game. Lerner's analysis makes clear, as she goes on to point out, first, that the division of women into respectable and disreputable was fundamental to the patriarchal system, and second, that women took their place in the class hierarchy on the basis of their relationship or absence of such to the men who protected them and on the basis of their sexual activity, and not, as with men, on the basis of their occupations and their relation to production. In spite of the unequivocal conceptual subordination of women codified in the laws governing the patriarchal family, upper class women did enjoy high status and legal rights and privileges. Indeed, women of all classes within the legal systems just discussed often enjoyed such rights as owning and managing property in their own name, entering into contracts, and bearing witness. As Lerner and others have argued, the high status and economic rights of kin and dependent women were not in conflict with the patriarchal system, but rather served the interests of ruling patriarchs by establishing power through a patrimonial bureaucracy. The security of their power, Lerner writes, depended on their installing family members in important subordinate positions of power. Such family members were quite often women, wives, concubines, or daughters. Thus emerged the role of wife as deputy. Such women influenced events and had real power over men and women of lower ranks, and could indeed even emerge as rulers, as did Queen Semiramis of Babylon, wife of Shamsi Adad, who lived from 824 to 810 BCE, and Nakiah, wife of Sennacherib, who lived from 704 to 681 BCE. As Lerner stresses, however, their power derived entirely from the male on whom they depended or to whom they were related. In addition to marrying other members of the elite and wielding power and influence on public and economic life by virtue of natal or marital status, upper-class women could also play an important role in the economic and legal life of the society as priestesses, naditum, or servants of the gods. Women, mostly from the upper classes, became naditum by being dedicated to the gods in childhood by their fathers. They not only owned property, but also had advantages over other women in that they could inherit property like a son, their property returning to their patriarchal family on their death. They engaged in business, leased fields and houses, bought slaves, entered into contracts, gave loans, and so on. Neditum women lived together in convent-like institutions. Marriage was rare but not forbidden. Besides playing an important part in the economic life of the community and ensuring that property remained within the patriarchal family, the institution of naditum clearly served the interests of the ruling class by cementing ties between the elite and the temple priesthood. The laws given women property rights and allowing them to enter contracts, bear witness, and engage in business benefited women of other classes as well. Women worked as potters, weavers, spinners, hairdressers, agricultural workers, bakers, singers, musicians, and brewers, and occasionally even in occupations requiring lengthy training periods, such as that of a scribe. Documents attest to their buying, selling, and renting property and buying and selling slaves, including slaves who were used as prostitutes to provide an income for their mistresses. Contracts were sometimes used to modify the terms of marriage, as in the marriage of a Musakal to a priest circa 1737 BCE, which gave her equal rights to and equal penalties for divorce. Contracts could also protect the wife from being liable to enslavement for her husband's debts, though this safeguard was presumably confined to classes that had the leverage to impose such terms. Many of the Mesopotamian laws were to have their parallels in Hebrew law, parallels that Lerner in particular has explored, as well as in Islamic law. Obvious similarities with Islamic law include giving the right to divorce almost exclusively to men, except when the contract stipulates otherwise, a contractual stipulation that Muslim women in some schools of law may also make, giving concubines who have borne children and their children rights to the father's property and to freedom, and giving women the right to testify, a right that was curtailed in the later Babylonian period. Regarding the last mentioned instance, Mesopotamian law, at least in its earlier form, was apparently more generous toward women than is Muslim law, or at least than Muslim law as traditionally interpreted, according to which the testimony of two women is equal to that of one man. Mesopotamian civilization, it should be noted, spanned several millennia and included the rise and fall of a series of specific cultures and peoples: Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian, each of which successively dominated the region. Its mores and laws regarding women have yet to be comprehensively examined by a scholar of that civilization. To date, only Lerner has systematically reflected on the theoretical implications of the societal organization of gender. Further, it should be noted that even though many women, in particular slave and lower class women, doubtless suffered unspeakable brutalities as allowed by law, artifacts from the civilization nevertheless attest to the mutuality, love, and affection that existed between husband and wives, fathers and daughters, and also attest that these were indeed qualities that the culture cherished and celebrated. Artists depicted loving couples calmly standing side by side, hand in hand, or one arm around the other's shoulders. Letters that husbands and wives wrote to each other while separated are also extant, attesting to their devotion. Documents survive in which, for example, husbands make donations to wives for the stated reason that she has cared for him and worked for him. Other documents safeguard the wife's livelihood in the case of the husband's premature death, or introduce clauses protecting her against the objections of relatives and children.